Guys, today I'm going to be showing you how I built this drink station. It doesn't usually sit outside, but we've got better lighting out here. I started with an old mini fridge. This thing had been sitting in my friend's garage for a couple of years without being used or running, so it was pretty disgusting on the inside. I didn't remember to film it, but I scrubbed this thing within an inch of its life until it looked like new. I masked off the mini fridge for paint, including some trim lines that would be removed and replaced later. First, a layer of white primer so that the paint would stick well and have a nice even background. Once the primer was dry, I masked off the bottom and painted the top of the fridge with a bright white enamel. Peeling off the masking, you can really see the difference between the white primer and the white cover coat. After the white coat was dry, I switched the masking up to the top so that I could paint all of the bottom. I brought the whole thing back inside to my apparently very yellow-colored lights and removed all of the masking. I removed the trim that I had painted over and put new stuff on. This way it was sticking to a bare metal on the fridge and not onto paint. Time to start working with the wood. I was trying to build a cabinet that fit around this mini fridge. At the time, wood was extremely expensive, and the cheapest way I could figure out to make panels large enough was to buy 12-inch wide boards and attach them to each other. This was my first time using a biscuit joiner, and I'm gonna say I liked it. I'm a fan of these things. If you're not familiar with a biscuit joiner, it's a special circular saw that cuts into the edge of wood just enough to fit in these little wooden biscuits. You then use the biscuits and some wood glue to attach boards together in ways that would be tricky without one. With the help of a lot of clamps and some weights, I let the glue on the boards dry. This left me with 3 boards the size that I wanted. In the end, it probably wasn't worth the money I saved making them like this, but it was a fun experience. I began cutting them down to size so they would fit perfectly around my fridge. I'm pretty sure my table saw could do with a new blade. All the pieces were looking good on the fit, so it's time to put them together. Okay, technically, I think if you have to invert your head to use any power tool, you're probably doing it wrong, but this is what worked in the end. Now, a biscuit joiner is great, and I'm glad I used it, but it's not the strongest connection in the world, so I also added some angle brackets. Everything was fitting well and going together great, but in the end, it wasn't quite strong enough, so I did add a couple more supports on the back of the fridge to make sure that this thing wouldn't wobble back and forth. I wanted the underside of the top shelf to rest in contact with the refrigerator with just a little bit of cushioning. A sheet of craft foam and 4 pieces of wood acting as feet held it in place. For the most part, I want this drink station to just stay in one spot, but just in case I do want to move it around, I decided to add some handles to the front and back of the top shelf. I made myself a pattern out of paper, then I cut 2 of those handles out of wood using a drill and a jigsaw. To make the handles way more comfortable to hold and actually use, I ran all of the edges, both inside and out, on a router table to give it a little bit more contour. A little pre-drilling and some screws, and the handles were attached to the front and back of the top shelf. Lucky for me, my dad has a pretty cool CNC machine, so he was able to cut out these nice bottle-holding shelves that fit right on top of the cabinet. All I had to do was use a jigsaw to cut through the remaining little tabs that were holding them onto the board. The back shelf of bottles was going to be higher than the front shelf, so it had two parts, a flat part for the bottles to rest on and a part with rings to hold them in place. I clamped them together and drilled straight through both so that the rods holding all the shelves up would keep it perfectly aligned. With the shelves not as clamped down as they really should have been, I drilled holes through the pilot holes that I had previously made to mark on the top shelf where the supporting rods would go. Then I moved the shelf out of the way, drilled them a little bit deeper, and added some wooden dowels to act as stilts to hold the whole thing up. Here you can see the front shelf in place with all of the stilts doing their job. But they stick out a little bit too much, so it's time to grab the old flush saw and chop them off. Here you can see the back shelf mounted in mostly the same way. I'm putting glue on the rods because the bottom shelf is actually too low right now, so I put the glue on all of them, spread it around a little bit, and then I used a hammer to tap it up into place so that the glue was going to do its job and hold that shelf there forever. I should have assembled the whole thing off the cabinet, but I was worried it wouldn't line up afterward. As a decorative element, I added a panel of what's called wainscoting to each side. I put glue on, held it in place with clamps, and then used a pin nailer to attach it all. Pin nailers use little pins that don't have any heads, so they sink partially into whatever surface you're attaching it to, so that by the time you paint over it, you can't even see that they were there. Continuing with the decorations, I added some crown molding along the bottom. Just had to cut it down with a jigsaw to make sure that I could fit it into my bandsaw, and then I used the bandsaw to trim it off so it was really nice and even with nice clean edges. The plan is to have a shelf off to the side of the main cabinet that holds up this ice bucket. So I traced out the shape of the ice bucket so I could cut it out of a board and attach it onto the side. Unfortunately, the actual attachment of that side shelf is another thing that I forgot to set up the camera to film. It's held on by two brackets that hold the shelf up beautifully when I want it, but has a couple of levers I can depress that let the whole thing fold down flat if I wanted to. While I had the camera not rolling, I also attached a little bit more trim to some of the other sides and corners of the cabinet. Right now, I'm putting some caulking over all of it so that it covers up all the gaps and I'll be able to paint over it nicely. I wanted the whole drink station to have a very strong, durable coat of paint, so I used this, scratch-resistant white house paint. But in the end, painting all of the nooks and crannies of the shelves was crazy annoying and hard, and I should have just gone with a thick coating of white spray paint. I didn't want the ice bucket to be resting on the shelf, held up directly by its handles, so I got a net that's designed for hanging potted plants and cut it down to the right size. I measured the size that I was going to need, cut off all of the extra, and then attached it to the bottom side of the shelf using staples and a staple gun. I never really loved the look of the labels that come on the syrup bottles that I was going to be using for this drink cart, so I wanted to make my own. I found a bunch of high-resolution, good quality pictures of each fruit flavor that I was going to be using, printed them out, and found a font that I thought worked well with the style. Each one was printed on sticky paper, the exact size of the original label. Carefully apply each label to the corresponding bottle, and suddenly you have a very different look than the original store-bought labels they come with. It's complete. My Italian soda drink station is all finished. I'm very happy with how it turned out. There are definitely some imperfections here and there, but I don't care about them. I wasn't making this to be a piece of fine cabinetry. I was making it to be something that looked okay and that I can use. So let's take a tour through how you go ahead and use it. First, the lovely fridge door. Inside it is well stocked with mostly carbonated water, some flavored carbonated water, a couple of sodas. I like to keep the cups in the fridge because they're cold that way. Take a scoop of ice. There we go. And get one of our little 2-ounce cups here. Fill it about 75% of the way with flavor. Well, I'm just gonna go with strawberry, mango. It's about 3/4 full. Whoop. Carbonated water. Take our same little cup, add some cream, and maybe 2/3. And grab yourself a straw. Fantastic, delicious Italian soda. Ooh, that's very good. There you have it. If you have any ideas of other things you'd like to see me try and make, let me know. Maybe I'll give them a shot. Well, that's probably good.